講義6風險評估 Handout 6 Risk Assessment 詳細說明了制定風險評估和方法說明以消除或降低風險的過程。Details the process of producing risk assessments and method statements to remove or minimize risks. 它定義了危險和風險。It defines hazard and risk. 它引用了1999年工作健康與安全管理條例，其中規定僱主必須有系統地檢查工作場所。It refers to the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999, which states that employers must systematically examine the workplace. 它概述了風險評估的5個步驟。It outlines a 5-step process for risk assessment. 識別危險，確定誰可能受到傷害以及如何受到傷害，評估風險並決定預防措施，記錄調查結果並實施、審查評估結果。Identify the hazards, decide who might be harmed and how, evaluate the risks and decide on precautions, record findings and implement them, and review the assessment. 當考慮講義6中所述的風險評估時，需要記住哪些關鍵事項？ When considering risk assessment as described in Handout 6, what are the key items to remember? 一風險評估的目的是什麼？ What is the purpose of risk assessment? 確定危險及其造成損害的可能性，然後採取措施控制風險。To determine hazards and their likelihood to cause harm, and then implement steps to control the risk. 而什麼是危險？ What is a hazard? 某些可能造成傷害的事物，例如化學物質、電力或在地面上作業。危險的一個例子是水溢出。Something with the potential to cause harm, like chemicals, electricity, or working above ground. An example of a hazard is a spill of water. 3. 什麼是風險？ What is a risk? 實際造成損害的可能性。如果能防止接觸水，那麼因灑出的水而滑倒的風險就會降低。The likelihood of harm actually being done. The risk of slipping on spilled water is reduced if access to the water is prevented. 4. 在健康和安全方面，什麼使一個人有能力？ What makes a person competent in the context of health and safety? 有能力的人擁有必要的技術技能、培訓和專業知識，可以安全地進行特定活動。A competent person has the necessary technical skills, training, and expertise to carry out a particular activity safely. 5. 針對任何風險評估建議的5個步驟是什麼？ What are the 5 steps recommended by the HSE for any risk assessment? 5.1 辨別危險 Identify the hazards. 5.2 決定誰可能受到傷害以及如何受到傷害。Decide who might be harmed and how. 5.3 評估風險並決定預防措施。Evaluate the risks and decide on precautions. 5.4 記錄發現並實施。Record findings and implement them. 5.5 審查風險評估並根據需要進行更新。Review the risk assessment and update if necessary. 6. 辨識危險時應考慮什麼？ What should be considered when identifying hazards? 透過在工作場所走動、詢問員工、查看 House 網站、諮詢行業協會和查看事故記錄來考慮哪些情況可能合理地造成傷害。Consider what could reasonably be expected to cause harm by walking around the workplace, asking employees, checking the HSE website, consulting trade associations, and reviewing accident records. 此外，也要考慮對健康的長期危害。Also, consider long-term hazards to health. 7. 在決定誰可能受到傷害時，應該考慮哪些群體？ When deciding who might be harmed, what groups should be considered? 有特殊要求的工人，例如新工人、年輕工人或殘疾工人、清潔工、訪客、承包商、維修工人和公眾成員。Workers with particular requirements, e.g., new, young, or disabled workers, cleaners, visitors, contractors, maintenance workers, and members of the public. 8. 控制風險應該遵循什麼原則？ What principles should be applied when controlling risks? 8.1 嘗試風險較小的選擇。Try a less risky option. 8.2 防止接近危險，例如透過守衛。Prevent access to the hazard, e.g. by guarding. 8.3 組織工作以減少曝光。Organize work to reduce exposure. 8.4 發放個人防護裝備 PPE. Issue personal protective equipment PPE. 8.5 提供福利設施 Provide welfare facilities. 9. 是否有必要記錄風險評估結果 Is it necessary to record risk assessment findings? 擁有5名以上員工的僱主必須記錄工作中的風險。Employers with more than 5 people must document the risks at work. 即使不是必須的，它對於以後的複習也是有用的。Even if not required, it is useful for later review. 10. 風險評估應該證明什麼 ？What should a risk assessment demonstrate? 它必須表明已經進行了適當的檢查，考慮到了可能受到影響的人，處理了所有重大危險，預防措施是合理的，剩餘風險很低，並且有工作人員參與。It must show that a proper check was made, who might be affected was considered, all significant hazards were dealt with, precautions are reasonable, the remaining risk is low, and staff were involved. 11. 風險評估應多久檢討和更新一次 ？How often should risk assessments be reviewed and updated? 應持續審查風險評估，並每年左右進行正式審查，或在工作場所發生重大變化時進行審查。Risk assessments should be reviewed on an ongoing basis and formally reviewed every year or so, or when there are significant changes in the workplace. 12. 方法陳述的目的是什麼 ？What is the purpose of a method statement? 確保安全關鍵工作按照特定順序進行。To ensure that safety-critical work is carried out in a particular sequence. 它證明與特定活動相關的風險已經過仔細考慮，並實施了適當的控制。It proves that the risks associated with a particular activity have been carefully considered and appropriate controls implemented. 13. 方法說明應該達成哪些最低目標 ？What minimum objectives should a method statement achieve? 它應該是最新的、可識別的、其來源可追溯的，包含工作順序、識別相關風險和控制措施、說明行動並詳細說明偏離方法說明所需的授權。It should be up to date, identifiable, its source accountable, contain a sequence of works, identify associated risks and control measures, and state actions and detail the authorization required to deviate from the method statement. 工作指錄風險評估 Worksheet 6 Risk Assessment 一依正確順序列出控制工作場所事故風險所採取的步驟。List the steps taken in the correct order to control the risk of an accident in the workplace. 1.1 消除原因 Eliminate the cause. 1.2 以風險較低的替代方案取代現有程序或產品。Substitute a procedure or product with a lower risk alternative. 1.3 封閉危險情況 Enclose the dangerous situation. 1.4 在危險區域周圍安排警衛 Put guards around the hazard. 1.5 使用安全的工作系統 Use safe systems of work. 1.6 監督、培訓並向員工提供資訊 Supervise, train and give information to staff. 1.7 如果無法消除或降低危險，請提供 PP. Provide PP if the hazard cannot be removed or minimized. 2. 列出完成工作場所風險評估的階段 List the stages for completing a risk assessment in the workplace. 2.1 步驟1辨識危害 Step 1 Identify the hazards. 2.2 步驟2確定誰可能受到傷害以及如何受到傷害 Step 2 Decide who might be harmed and how. 2.3 步驟3 評估風險並決定預防措施。Step 3 Evaluate the risks and decide on precautions。2.4 步驟4記錄你的發現並實施它們。Step 4 Record your findings and implement them。2.5 步驟5檢視你的風險評估並根據需要進行更新。Step 5 Review your risk assessment and update if necessary。